Really excited for this Transformation Tuesday. My name is Jerry Hawkins. I'm the Executive Director of Dallas Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation. Dallas Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation's mission is to create a radically inclusive city by addressing race and racism through the TRHT framework, which includes truth, which is narrative change, racial healing, which we call relationship building, and transformation, which we call equitable policies and practices. We are excited because this Transformation Tuesday, like everyone, is a way for us to discuss different topics that involve the issues of race and racism in the place in which we live. And also we get to talk directly to community members on the work that they're working on, and also ways we can solve or decrease the harm of racism in our communities. I'm excited today because we have Colin Yarbrough here. Colin's written a great book, which he'll tell you a little bit more about. So Colin, can we just start off and just introduce yourself and let us know what you do, and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm a almost lifelong resident of Dallas. I've lived here since '89, and grew up around here, and been privileged by the way that Dallas was built by people who look like me and for people who look like me. And about February of last year, that's when I really started to have this kind of everything coalescing between my engineering background and the built environment, and understanding all these conversations from my mom's white privilege and racism discussions in her own doctoral work. We're marrying with kind of my understandings of how engineering and the built environment kind of reflect these issues of systemic injustice in our city. And that's what kind of led me to write the book Paved Away.
Awesome. We'll stop right there because I want you to tell us a little bit more about your book.
Yeah.
But I want to introduce our other community partner here, Mr. Jonathan Maples. I was with Mr. Maples yesterday, and we led a march and a protest, and really a call to action to the city to recognize the power of community members in deciding their issues in the neighborhood. Mr. Maples, thank you for being with us. And can you share a little bit about yourself and where you're from, and some of the things that you're interested in fighting for today?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my name is Jonathan Maples, and I am a resident of Elm Thicket, North Park for over 50 years. For those who are not familiar with Elm Thicket, North Park, we're bordered by Lover's Lane to the north, Mockingbird to the south, Lemon Avenue to the west, and Inwood to the east. We are a historically African-American neighborhood. Our neighborhood began over before there was a Love Field Airport. It was actually a military air station. And right beside that military air station was, Carver's Court, the Bottoms, as they called it. We lived and thrived there. But when deregulation happened, the neighborhood was displaced and moved across what is now known as Lemon Avenue. And we have lived in Elm Thicket, North Park for many years. I mean, before the streets were paved. Not me personally, but the neighborhood is there. And one of the things that is important to me, and is important for me to stand up and fight for. And sometimes, let me just say this. Sometimes when I use the word fight, people find it to be offensive. Well, when I use the word fight, I mean stand up for. And for those who think that the word fight means a literal fight, then they need to go to some of the cheerleading camps where all the cheerleaders talk about fight, fight, fight. Now, what's important to me is I'm at the point in my life to where I'm sick and tired of the people who have the power or the powers to be to always herd around certain groups of people of color, people of a certain economic standing. We get herded around the neighborhood, told where we can live for a certain period of time, and then we're herded again to another part. You know, I don't see gentrification as what it is in my neighborhood. I see it as an attempted hostile takeover. If you have read some of the things that have been put out on social media about me personally trying to hold on to the name and history of my neighborhood, then you would definitely know why I am in this fight to save her. But not only Elm Thicket North Park, but every other neighborhood in the city of Dallas that's going through the same thing.
We're gonna get into that, Mr. Maples. So thank you for that. Colin, you wrote a really cool book. Tell us more about why you wrote your book, Paved the Way. And, you know, I was really surprised, and Stephanie, you know, brought it to our attention. You know, I opened up the book, in the first 2 pages, you gave a shout out to Dallas TRHT. So can you share a little bit about your shout out to Dallas TRHT, and then also why you wrote the book and why is it important for us to check out today?
Yeah, I mean, early on in my, so the book started as, it was a grad school paper on Central Expressway.
Tell us a little bit about Central Expressway.
So the Central Expressway we know today was originally constructed in 1949. And that went right through the North Dallas, Freedmanstown, State Thomas, several different names. And it was a railroad track. That's where the Central name comes from. The Houston, Texas Central Railroad went through there. And kind of on Lemon Avenue, the same Lemon Avenue that runs through Elm Thicket further west, ran through to the east. There was a graveyard, cemetery, Freedman Cemetery. And when Central was constructed and Lemon Avenue was expanded in 49, they paved over graves in that cemetery. And in the process of expanding and digging down to make Central what it is today in the late 80s, they discovered all these bodies. And they were going to move all of these bodies, over 1,100 bodies, to make space for the freeway that we use today. And Central, the fact that nothing exists anymore of that Freedmanstown, and when I found that out, I was shocked, because I had spent a lot of my 20s in Uptown asking myself, why are there these cemeteries in Uptown, when I should have been asking the opposite question of, why is Uptown surrounding all of these cemeteries? And so it was at that moment where I realized how the erasure of that neighborhood through the original, you know, Central it blew right through Hall Street, right through the economic heart of the neighborhood, and was one of the last dominoes to really fall to send that community and the neighborhood spiraling, because it just cut out right through the middle of the neighborhood. And seeing how my life later directly privileged and benefited from the erasure of that neighborhood and the erasure of the culture, the name, everything. There's very few pieces of that neighborhood left to even call out that there used to be a Freedmanstown there. And as I kept digging, no pun intended, I kept finding every other highway in Dallas had a similar story through a different neighborhood of color, whether that was Deep Ellum, Little Mexico, 10th Street, all over Dallas. It was a similar story. Dallas has this great pattern of displacement and erasure. And that's when I found out about Dallas TRHT. And I realized that narrative change was at the heart of this. It's when you and I think Jonathan, you've said this in some of your interviews too, like when there's nothing left, when you don't have anything left, it's so hard to fight for that history when there's nothing physical left. And that's really what we're talking about today, is this fight to make sure that what is standing today in the history and that narrative remains and is not erased by the powers that be.
And thank you, Colin. Mr. Maples,
Mhm.
you've given us some history about Elm Thicket, and I lived in the northern part of that neighborhood, north of Bluffview. I lived in Bachman Lake and Midway Hollow since I moved to Dallas. Partially, and this is, I think, instructive for everybody, there's history all around us, right? Happened upon the Garvin Memorial Cemetery, which is this small Confederate cemetery in between Midway and Marsh on Northwest Highway. And I started to just look in the city files for this Garvin Memorial Cemetery. And they mention this brief Negro cemetery that was unmarked, but surrounded by a gate, and then potentially several dozens other unmarked graves of former enslaved people and also former Elm Thicket residents. And I'm thinking, man, this was a larger neighborhood than folks had already, discussed. And there's a direct connection, not only to slavery, but also to the Civil War and also, Reconstruction, right? So this neighborhood is older than I'm thinking. And then there's the older history, right? Because we always talk about this 30 divide, right? Folks on the South Side or the West Side, and people don't really talk about Black communities in North Dallas a lot. And that's where, most of the Black communities sprouted up in Dallas. Found out about Jane Elkins, which in the history texts say that she lived a mile west of Cochran Chapel, which is on the corner of Northwest Highway and Marsh, right?
And Marsh,
So
that's
again, a
correct.
very historic neighborhood.
Correct.
Can you share what's happening right now to this very historic neighborhood?
So let me start off by saying I'm old enough to remember State Thomas and Hall. Both sides, my mother's side of the family and my father's side of the family, both lived in Old North Dallas. So I know that area. It existed when I was growing up. There was a cab stand. There was, I believe, a movie theater. That's the original location of Henderson's Chicken. And, they had this wonderful Juneteenth parade. Matter of fact, you can go to the African American Museum and see that State Thomas, North Dallas Juneteenth parade, where they had a bronze mayor, and it's wonderful. But to go back, just think about that: 1,100 graves that was going to be potentially covered up until someone brought it to the attention of the powers that be, to say, hey, you can't build on top of this. And then you look at the migration west. So if you migrate west from State Thomas, which is now known as Uptown, you go west, you come across Arlington Park and Elm Thicket North Park. You come straight across, you're at Midway and Bluffview, which is, where the Freedmen's Cemetery is that you just mentioned. You go right down to where the plantation was that this young lady lived on, who ultimately was the first woman to be executed in the state of Texas.
And
now,
the first bill of sale of Dallas County. So.
That's right. So as you look at that migration west, that covers everything from what we know now is Interstate 75 all the way to Love Field Airport. You have to imagine all the houses and communities that were set up by African Americans along the way. Well, what we're seeing now, as I just mentioned, is the attempted hostile takeover disguised as gentrification. Now, back when the neighborhood was displaced the first time, that was about the time when white flight started to happen, and other neighbors, Caucasian neighbors, decided they didn't want to live near us, so they went to the suburbs. Well, now we fast forward a few decades, and their children want to come back to the inner city. Now, unfortunately, enough of our history did not get told back then. I had parents and grandparents who talked to me about the history and understanding the history. As a matter of fact, one of my very close friends who lives on the north side of Northwest Highway up near Thomas Jefferson High School, the Tuvings, they all went to church at Cochran Chapel. And the first time when his grandpa passed, I went to the church, and the pastor, before he even started his sermon, explained, this church has been here as long as Texas has been a state. And if that's the case, I would have to believe in some way, form, or fashion that this church helped freedmen along the way, along their journey.
And I'm really interested in that too, because that church also has a grave site next to it, Cochran Chapel. If you've ever been there.
Absolutely.
And some of the founders, so-called founders of what we call Farmers Branch, which is now a suburb, but we used to be extended down there where there were plantations and slave owners like Obadiah Knight and the Bachmans and the Marshes are buried there. So this is really interesting history. And tell us a little bit more about what's happening.
And the gentleman that did the article with you, Wolonsky, I went to high school with him. So we all went to TJ. So there's a tremendous amount of Black history that is north of the Trinity River. You take what was State Thomas, Arlington Park, Elm Thicket North Park, Hamilton Park, and a lot of people don't even know that all that land where the Galleria Mall is and Valley View Mall is, that was all Black farmland.
So, Colin, going back to you, what can you share about, like the intersection of race and infrastructure has manifested in Dallas, even beyond 75?
It goes all the way back to, the Battle of Village Creek in 1841. Like, gentrification is settler colonialism by another name. Mm-hmm. It's how racial power, white racial power, continues to control, define, and perpetuate power through the use of land, and controlling, like Jonathan was saying, herding people around as see fit. And in Dallas's context, broader than just 75 and broader than just highways. Even in Elm Thicket, the expansion of Love Field, erasing the western parts of the Elm Thicket neighborhood. D Magazine put on the cover just this month the parking lots, at Fair Park, displacing over 300 homes to make space for the parking lots so that white people, there it is, thank you. So that white people would feel more comfortable. And I'm glad they put the quote on the front of basically, this economic research group that came in, paid for by the city of Dallas and the state fair, to make white people feel more comfortable. And they said, hey, if we move all these poor Black people in their homes further away and we just put up a lit, paved, gated parking lot, would that make you feel better? And everybody's like, yeah, that's exactly what we want. Yeah, if you can just get rid of the Black people, that'll make us feel better, and we'll want to go there. And I think that's really the narrative that's at the heart of this intersection of race and gentrification, because gentrification is, it's three pieces. You have displacement, and then you have physical transformation through whether that's, buying homes, tearing down churches, whatever it is. And then it's cultural displacement. which is the other piece. And that's where you get into changing of names, changing State Thomas to Uptown so that you don't know what used to be there. And so it's like you come in, and if you went to Uptown today, you'd think, oh, this has just always been like this. And that's really that's the devastating piece to me, is when we talk about gentrification, a lot of times people talk about it in numbers, or they try to, keep an arm's length distance from it. They're like, oh, it's happening or it's not happening. And I think that's the wrong question and aspect to be focusing on, because lived experience is the most important piece of this. That cannot be refuted. Whether it's 1% or 2% gentrification doesn't really matter. People are still being displaced. Those are real lives, and those are real outcomes. And in Dallas, that's Black, Mexican American, Latinx neighborhoods that are being displaced and pushed out. They were pushed in, and then now they're being pushed out. As Jonathan was talking about, people are wanting to move back to the center of the city. And so we're seeing this outward dispersion of people of color and lower income individuals out of the city. And it's, I remember when I was doing the research on the Little Mexico piece in the book, there was this 1940 newspaper article. And this kind of gets back to this idea of kind of colonialism and this centering of whiteness in like valuing space. And they talked about, expanding Turney Street, which is now Harry Hines, through Little Mexico. And like the language that was used never described the area that was Little Mexico. Talked about it as if it were some new land that was being discovered, and it wasn't a place that people really went. And I imagine that's what white people are talking about with Elm Thicket. They're like, oh, we drive by there all the time. We haven't really paid attention to it, but now that we're paying attention to it, look at this new place we've discovered. It's like, Elm Thicket's been here forever. Like, it's been here longer than a lot of people. It was the same thing with Little Mexico. And so we continue to see these patterns where as soon as, whiteness has described a new place of like, oh, we found this place, it's so great, let's move there, it automatically discredits any history or culture of color that exists in that place.
That's a great segue to this
said.
question from Mr. Maples, because Mr. Maples shared this document that's really describing what's happening in the community, including community coming in trying to change the name of the community, right? Mr. Maples, I want you to describe like kind of the evolution of the neighborhood, because it's a very unique neighborhood. It's surrounded by white neighborhoods, right? And wealthy neighborhoods too, right? It's, Love Field on this side, and you have Bluff View on the north side, and then you have Preston Hollow and Highland Park very adjacent on this side. It's a very interesting neighborhood. Can you describe kind of how these surrounding communities have been interacting with, and now I think coming in and gentrifying and trying to move people out of the neighborhood?
Yeah, so my family, on my mother's side, she had 7 brothers and sisters. We are the only ones who live north of the Trinity River. And for a long time, my cousins in Oak Cliff thought we were rich because we live north of the Trinity. However, Elm Thicket North Park is 15 minutes from anywhere. It's 5 minutes from the gates at Love Field. It's 5 minutes from the Inwood Village. And it's 15 minutes from downtown. So it is a desirable place to live. However, this land was left, for years, as I mentioned, Black and brown people were told where we could live. This is one of the places where we lived and we thrived. We had state representatives, professional people, doctors, lawyers, educators, and common folks who went to work every day. Some working 2 jobs to pay for their homes in this community that they loved. And what we are seeing now that is really disheartening is those same senior citizens who did whatever they had to do, jump through hoops to buy those homes and raise their families, have gotten to the golden years of their lives and are worried about being taxed out of their homes. I, on every level, feel like that's the worst thing you can do to an individual, especially a senior citizen. And this is what we're facing. And in the video where I talked about fighting for the senior citizens, that's what I was fighting for. I'm fighting to keep the developers away from sending a letter or 2 or 3 a week, phone calls daily, unexpected visitors knocking on their doors, asking them to sell their homes, schemes that say, hey, if you don't sell right now, prices are going to go back to the 1980s prices and you're going to lose the value of your home. Scare tactics, just things of that nature, just total nastiness for a group of people, builders and realtors, who have this preconceived notion that this land is going to make them filthy rich. As a matter of fact, we have a builder in the neighborhood who was convicted of drug dealing and money laundering. Had a couple of dope houses in this neighborhood, went to prison, got out of prison, came back, and he's one of the leading builders in the neighborhood. Now, I look at that situation, and if it was me, I wouldn't be able to sell a damn doghouse. So it is very frustrating on many, many levels as to what we're seeing happen, not only just in my community, but all over the city. And the city, if they don't have a plan, they need to come up with a plan pretty quickly. Because when I tell you that when the developers came in and they started saying Elm Thicket now is called Lovers Lane Heights or University Hills or whatever, and we know that it is Elm Thicket North Park, the first thing I said is, hey, we need to go get sign toppers and get sign toppers in this neighborhood so that whenever they're showing a house, no matter what they want to call the neighborhood, when those people come by that are looking at these homes and they look at any stop sign, they're going to see Elm Thicket North Park on the top of the stop sign. And then to hold on to our history, make a video. We printed a book. So we want everybody to know Elm Thicket is here and we're here to stay because, you know, it broke my parents' heart to see what happened at State Thomas because they grew up there. They went to elementary school over there. So they know the area as it was being taken over.
That's great.
And as a matter of fact, Kimberly, who serves as the secretary of the Elm Thicket North Park Neighborhood Association, she's a member of Pilgrim Rest, which is a church right there on Washington.
That's right. And it was actually, that was another church that was actually moved as well.
That's
because
right.
of the gentrification and removal of State Thomas and Short North Dallas.
That's right.
So you started to allude to this, what the city should do, Mr. Maples. Let me start with you on this question. What should we be thinking about when we talk about the transformation and repair that needs to happen to make these processes of gentrification or even like community rebuilding more equitable? I am of the mind that because of all of the racist policies the city of Dallas has had and allow realtors and other people, mortgage companies to do, that they should at least keep and pay for the senior citizens, particularly the senior citizens of color, to stay in their communities because they create culture and they create stability in communities. What do you think? What do you think should happen to make this, this kind of community building and rebuilding thing that happens all the time more equitable?
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. I think that the city must find a way to hold these builders accountable. I remember at one point we had a discussion for every McMansion you build, you build 2 affordable homes. We come up with a plan for anyone 65 and older that owns a home, that we get a freeze on their taxes, not lowering of the taxes. We need to freeze their taxes because a lot of them are on set incomes. And you know, it can be done, but it has to be a willingness to want, you know, to want to do something. You know, as I mentioned yesterday, when I was speaking, I don't know who it was. I don't know what powers to be set in a meeting somewhere and decided how they were going to split up Dallas. But if you look at Dallas in the grand scheme of things, somewhere behind some closed doors, developers and someone of the power structure divided how they were going to split up Dallas and who was going to take what. But I'm here to tell you, a lot of us aren't having it. And I think that as more, as we talk about it more, and as you hold these types of forums, and as you continue to do the work that you're doing, my brother, I think that we will get people in the know. And if they're in the know, then they will get involved, and then we could beat back what we're seeing.
Colin, what about you? What do you think should, you know, repair needs to happen? Some transformation of system needs to happen in order to make, particularly like gentrification and this intersection of infrastructure more equitable. You know, I know finally the mayor is like putting in lights in South Dallas. That's like appalling to me because they should have had lights already, right? It's 2021. You know what I mean? That's a easy infrastructure fix, right? So what else should be happening?
Yeah, well, I think, man, well, first of all, both of y'all yesterday at the self-determination protest outside of City Hall was just incredible. You had all of these neighborhoods and residents from across the city.
That was amazing. Just a group
Yes.
of residential associations and concerned citizens. I was honored to be there to see that, because that's like solidarity. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that's where it starts. Like, to your question, like, I think that's where it starts. It starts with neighborhoods standing up and saying, no plans for us without us. We're not going to allow the city of Dallas to continue creating urban plans and planning documents without the residents being involved. You know, I look back at how so much of the infrastructure that was developed in Dallas's history, it was done without people at the table. We weren't asking who's setting the agenda, and we weren't asking who's not at the table. And I think those are two fundamental questions that we have to be able to answer if we're going to move forward in any sort of equitable way. And we have to be able to bring those narratives of residents back into the fore. We have to talk honestly about the history of wherever we are doing work before we can even begin to develop anything. Because if you don't understand the displacement that has occurred over generations in the city, then all you're doing is you're just continuing to build on top of brokenness. And that's not an equitable or just way to build anything.
Correct.
And I could probably go on a lot longer, but I'll hold myself back.
Yeah. So, you know, like just putting a pin on our conversation. What can first of all, what can a community do to support and promote equity and healing and justice for you and the work that you all are doing in Elm Thicket, North Park, Mr. Maples?
Well, initially, I want everyone to be informed, to be engaged. You know, I mentioned that, you know, my neighborhood is bordered by Lovers to the north, a Mockingbird to the south, Lemon to the west, and Inwood to the east. That's not a large piece of land. But in that community, we have 10 churches. And it is a responsibility of all of us to all get engaged. Because if we are engaged, and if we have coalitions that we could all work together, then I believe our voices ultimately can be heard, because it's tough just being one person saying what I think should happen. But when it's collectively 50, 500, 1,000 people all saying the same thing, the powers that be have to listen. And they have to come up with a plan and a structure to listen to us.
No, that's great. That's great. What about you, Colin? What do you think the community should do to support? You know, I know some great folks like, you know, Evelyn, Maya, and Jennifer, and Victoria, and what they're doing to make this work equitable. I'm inspired by, you know, folks who are have to turn activists in their older years, like Miss Marsha Jackson.
Yeah.
When you know, she want to just chill and ride a horse or something.
Right.
You know, she don't want to be an activist, but she is now turned into this activist person in her later years. And you know, again, I feel sorry that she has to do that, you know, but her inspiration, her example is going to be an inspiration for so many people. So what should we be doing and thinking about?
And I wholeheartedly agree. And Jonathan hit the nail on the head earlier, talking about coalition building. I think that's one of the best things we can do is build coalitions between residents, neighbors, community organizations, and all of those working together to build a more equitable and just and healed city. We can't do that individually. But I do think there is an opportunity, particularly from an anti-racist lens, because moving in an anti-racist way requires that we start to dismantle these structures. You know, I talk about infrastructure. It is these structures in structural racism, or at least that's how, you know, as an engineer, that makes sense to me. I'm like, oh yes, these are the actual structures. This is how it's carried out. And it takes it from some abstract conversation into something that's real that you can see and that you can look at. And I think once we can start to identify these patterns of injustice that continue to perpetuate, because what Elm Thicket is experiencing right now is the same pattern that has happened over and over and over again, and we're recognizing it. So we have an opportunity now to do something about it and call it out and take action on it. And so I think that can happen both at the personal level and it happens at the city level too. And I think at the personal level, I was teaching Sunday school just a couple of days ago, and I was invited in to kind of talk about the book a little bit, talk about, you know, what is infrastructure, racism, and our faith, and the Christian faith. You know, how does that all intertwine, and how do we call ourselves forward toward justice? And there was one class member that kept repeating the phrase, unfortunately, and then inserted an example of some sort of inequity. And I just couldn't help think two things. I was like, I appreciate, one, you've recognized this pattern. So the fact that you're saying unfortunately, and you're identifying this inequity that's happening. But I kept getting hung up on the fact that talking about it as something that's unfortunate implies that there's a powerlessness in that. And it's allowing the power of the larger systems of white privilege to continue perpetuating. And at that point, they've already won, if you just rest in that, unfortunately. And so trying to figure out, how do we as residents and neighbors move from this space of, you know, unfortunately, gentrification happens. Unfortunately, people get displaced from the neighborhoods. It's just what happens. Towards some sort of, fortunately, we identified it and we figured out and worked with others to do X about it. And I think that's the space we have to move from, unfortunately, to fortunately we did something and we stopped it from repeating. I don't know what that looks like, but I feel like it's a good place to start.
For sure. So
Well,
Mr. Maples, yeah, that's it. Mr. Maples, where can we find out more about you and find out, you know, get in contact with you and folks can support you?
Well, I'll give my cell phone number out here on the forum. I don't mind taking calls and texts from time to time. Okay. I can be reached at 214-868-5760, or you can email me at Jonathan, that's JONATHAN _Maples, MAPLES @ yahoo.com. And I'm also on Facebook.
So find Mr. Maples, but be serious because he's a serious brother and he's very serious about Elm Thicket. And also go
I'm
visit Elm
serious.
Thicket. It's a beautiful community. They have a spray park. I mean, it's just a great recreation center there with some great history surrounding it. And me and Mr. Maples, who said we're gonna start working on some historical plaques too. So that'll be
Absolutely.
hopefully coming up. So thank you, Mr. Maples, for being here. Colin, how can we find out more about the work that you're doing? Well, first of all, just give us a pub for the book.
Oh, man. I'm like the worst self-promoter in the world.
It's all good.
Yeah, so the book is Paved a Way, Infrastructure, Public Policy and Racism in an American City. It's there it is. I don't even have a copy around me. Yeah, it's a good entry point to other works like White Metropolis and The Accommodation that have just come out. Hardcover just released a couple of weeks ago, and audiobook should be coming.
You got a hardcover for it?
Got a hardcover for it, just released.
We got to get one of those for sure.
So, but yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm on Instagram, all those kinds of things. Colin Wrights Design. So
awesome. Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you all for being candid and really, informing us a lot today. I think this is a really great and very, direct conversation. Please follow us at dallastrht.org. Check out our resources. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at DallasTRHT. We thank you for joining us on another Transformation Tuesday, and we will see you all soon. Thank you, Colin, and thank you, Mr. Maple.
Thank y'all.
All right.
Thank you.